Good afternoon. I'm Shelley Burgoyne. I'm the Communications Director at the Pima County Democratic Party in Tucson. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We all have really busy lives, and so we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn more about public education in Arizona and the superintendent's role and her vision for the future. This afternoon, we're sitting down with the Arizona Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kathy Hoffman. Over 92% of Arizona kids attend a public school, and so the funding, teacher recruitment, and management of our public school system is crucial to the success of our state and our children. Kathy Hoffman has served as Arizona's Superintendent of Public Instruction since 2019. She is a former public school teacher and a speech pathologist, becoming the first educator to actually lead the Department of Education in Arizona in over 20 years since the time of her appointment. Superintendent Hoffman, thank you so much for joining us today. You also are really busy, so we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with Arizona parents and our residents of Pima County about your tough job and your vision for the future. Superintendent, perhaps you could start us off by just explaining to our audience the role of your elected position as the Superintendent of Public Instruction in Arizona.
Thank you. Well, first, good afternoon, everybody. It's truly my privilege to be with you all. I miss living in Tucson. I started my career when I was a speech therapist and as a preschool teacher in the Tucson area. And so I wish I could be there with you in person. And thank you so much for making the time for this discussion today. And just to add on a little bit, in addition to being the first educator in over 20 years to hold this position, it was also the first time in over 20 years to have a Democrat holding this position. So it is really critical to have your support as we go into the re-election this coming November. I really appreciate everyone's support. And the other piece I'll add is I am also a new mom. I have a 6-month-old daughter at home now. Her name's Clara. If you hear her at all in the background, my apologies right away, but I do have my mother-in-law with her right now so that I can be with you here today. And so you wanted me to share a little bit more about the role?
Yeah, your role, and just sort of explain to Arizona residents kind of what you do as superintendent.
Yeah, so Arizona is one of the few states in the country that elects their superintendent of public instruction. In many other states, it is by appointment by the governor. And so I do think that is a unique feature of this position. And I came into this role as first-time candidate, coming straight from the classroom, straight from the public school system. And I knew I wanted to reimagine what this role meant for Arizona. And to me, one of the biggest responsibilities is being the chief advocate for public education in Arizona. And just in my first year in office, I traveled to schools in all 15 counties, over 100 schools, so that I could really understand and hear directly from our teachers, from our students, from community members about what was going well and what needed our immediate attention. In my position, I lead the Department of Education for the state. We have 4 offices, including one in Tucson, a smaller office down there. But in total, we have over 600 education professionals serving our public schools across the state with many different types of programming and services, including administering federal and state grants for public education. We oversee special education, school safety and wellness, all of the health and nutrition programs like the school meals. And of course, during the pandemic, over the last couple of years, we played a critical role in disseminating information to our schools and working closely with the public health partners to do everything we could to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone in our schools.
Thank you. So I guess we'll start off with just the first question. You've implemented a number of new programs after taking office. Of those, which would you say are the 2 most effective?
The 2 most effective and most important that are new programs, I would say, first, I would point to establishing our educator recruitment and retention team. So coming into this role, and this is persisting even today, is our severe teacher shortage across the state. And so I thought, right when I got into office, establishing the educator recruitment and retention team that works closely with school leaders on building and strengthening their pipelines and helping them to also retain the teachers and other education staff as well, such as our people who work in special education or even bus drivers. We do have shortages across many areas. So I would point to that as one success. The second is we all know that the mental health of our students must be one of our top priorities. And I'm very proud that we were able to first in 2019 expand the school safety grant program with $20 million from the state legislature, which added hundreds of school counselors and social workers into our schools. But then we still had a wait list of about 140 schools that had requested one of these mental health positions. And so then when we received the federal COVID relief funding, and we were able to use our discretionary funds for statewide initiatives, we funded the wait list, adding an additional 140 school counselors and social workers across the state. And so as of last year, we were able to reduce the student to school counselor ratio by 20%, which we know is having an immediate impact in our classrooms to the students as well as to the other educators that support our students to be able to have those mental health professionals on site.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. What are your top 3 priorities if you're elected?
I often say my priorities haven't changed much, and part of why is because we do have such a gridlock over at the state capitol in terms of having the Republican-controlled legislature does cause a lot of barriers and challenges. So my priorities have more urgency now, more than ever, including educator recruitment and retention, the safety and well-being, the mental health of our students, closing the digital divide and serving our students in rural parts of the state. That became very crystal clear during the pandemic of how far behind Arizona was in terms of students' access to technology and having internet at home, and even for our teachers having internet or all the skills they need to be successfully administering technology. So those are some of those key areas. I have to also mention, especially thinking about what the future of preschool and kindergarten looks like, thinking about my own daughter. Yeah. Arizona still does not have any state funding for preschool programs, and we still do not have funded full-day kindergarten. If you have heard about a school that has a full-day kindergarten, it's because they are pulling from other funding streams, such as federal funds, in order to have those types of programs. So that continues to also be one of my top concerns that I can't leave out.
What has been the most challenging part of your job? I'm sure there's a lot, but I guess maybe just one thing that just was really difficult on a daily basis.
The most challenging part of my job is the politics. I come from straight from the classroom, as I said, as an educator, as a speech pathologist, and to me, it shouldn't be so hard to work together to serve our public schools, to serve our teachers and students. But time and time again, I've just been so frustrated with the instability caused by state lawmakers or by Governor Ducey in times when we need the stability more than ever. And then with policies that come out of left field that cause a lot of disruption or even fears, all the concerns and attacks on our educators, not treating them as the professionals that they are. So I would have to say that it's the politics that makes my job hard.
That makes sense. What are your main concerns for public instruction going into 2023? So as I guess school starts, and we make our way through the first semester.
Looking ahead to next school year, I'm feeling hopeful that we will not have the same degree of disruption as we have the last couple years. I have to knock on wood because every single year I keep saying that, and then we keep having major disruptions. But as we go into hopefully a more normal school year this coming fall and then the summer, I think some of the biggest challenges are now that we can see the academic data of the state assessments that were administered last spring as well as this spring. As we're looking at that data, we are seeing that some of those achievement gaps have been widened. So in particular, our students with disabilities, students who are multilingual English learners, and students of color. Those achievement gaps have actually been exacerbated by the pandemic, and we need to be laser focused on that issue and what we can do to accelerate learning.
Specifically in regards to schools and public schools in Tucson and Pima County, what do you see that is working in Tucson and Pima County, and maybe if anything's not working, and what can we do in Tucson and Pima County surrounding area to support our public schools here?
I have visited so many phenomenal schools in the Pima County area, most recently Salaries. I visited TUSD and Vail. So many phenomenal programs. Just a bunch flooded my memories. I think about the career and technical education programs. For example, one of the ones I was able to visit was our high school students building tiny houses, which just brings them such amazing carpentry skills. I know I visited a bilingual Spanish-English immersion program in TUSD that just I absolutely adored. And they had a fabulous garden for students as well. So there's so many wonderful examples. When I visited in Sarita, they had a culinary program where students were working on a recipe together. Great life skills and building up our students to be career ready as well. I think the challenges for schools in Pima County are similar to other parts of the state. I think, we do have a high number of students who are our multilingual English learning students. And as I said, those gaps have widened in terms of their readiness, in terms of especially math. Math had the biggest hit in terms of academic abilities during the pandemic, but reading and writing as well. So we have been working strategically on how do we leverage those federal funds to have more interventionists in our schools and more wraparound supports for all of our students who are in need.
Absolutely. I mean, math's hard enough. I can't imagine having such a disruption to that. Like, it's so difficult. This is an important one. How can a parent review the specifics of Arizona Public School curriculum at any given time in a school or district? So how does a parent in Tucson, if they want to know what's being taught in a school, how do they do that?
I love that question because there has been such tension and animosity towards our schools and a lot of fear mongering around what is being taught in our public schools. So I strongly encourage parents to be involved in their child's education. And the first step is to ask the teacher to look at what's being taught on a day-to-day basis and to learn directly from their child's teacher. If they feel like they want more information or about other curriculum that's being taught, it is appropriate to reach out to school leaders or to the district. I know, what we're seeing with the attacks of or the more tense issues that we're seeing at the school board level. I do feel like going to a school board meeting is not the best place to get information. It's more, you can tune in and find out about what curriculum is being adopted. Curriculum, I should make it very clear, curriculum is adopted at the school board level. It is a local control decision. So the curriculum in Saurita is different from the curriculum in Tucson Unified, different from Sunnyside, Flowing Wells. They can all have different curriculum based on the local decision makers, which falls with the school boards. But I would encourage those conversations directly between parents and teachers, which I think we need to be building those bridges and working collaboratively together.
Absolutely. And, just one point is, parents are really busy and we elect a school board and they just, they decide on the curriculum. And like you said, it's a very transparent process that a parent has access to at any given time. One more before we go to the audience. How are you dealing, and you've talked about this a bit, but how are you dealing with the pressure, I guess, from the right, about banning books and kind of harassing and bullying transgender kids? I can't even imagine. And, CRT, whatever. How are you dealing with that as our leader in public education here in Arizona?
I speak out vocally against all of those types of issues that are coming, from all sides. It really is a vocal minority who are concerned about those types of issues, but it is unfortunately being very effective at creating new laws. And so in terms of what's happening at the state legislature, my office we can sign in to oppose and speak out against specific bills. Unfortunately, several of those have still passed successfully through the legislature. For example, the anti-trans bills did already get signed into law by Governor Ducey, and I participated in a press conference right at the day after he signed those to make my voice joined in with we had parents and other community members who joined in the press conference. And so I do everything I can. You know, if you look at my social media, Twitter, Facebook, we're constantly putting out statements. And unfortunately, that goes back to what's the hardest part of the job is the politics and feeling sometimes like we're hitting our heads against the wall, trying to move things in the right direction in a way where our schools should be welcoming and inclusive for all children. And these messages are sending the wrong message to our kids.
Absolutely. I know that I remember when the anti-trans law was just signed by Ducey. I think that afternoon you tweeted like, all children, no matter what, are welcome in every public school in Arizona. And so I think, just, thank you. And as the leader of public education, it's important for people to hear that from you. Let's take one from the audience. Let's see. And maybe if the audience could maybe put it for future, maybe put in the chat kind of where you live and kind of, do you have kids in school? Are you an educator? Kind of just what your context or background is. Here's one. Please explain how you have connected with county school superintendent offices with ADE and new grant opportunities.
I appreciate this question from Superintendent Williams. So we have opened grant opportunities for our county superintendent offices around the state, as well as other community-based organizations to apply to access the federal funds, the COVID relief funds. And then we're in the process of working even more directly with the county superintendents on another set aside bucket of funds to work in collaboration with our county superintendents, because it's our county superintendents offices for each county, who are also elected, by the way, that they work really closely with the local districts and charters as well to have widespread support at the county level. So that's really important local support for our communities. So we appreciate that collaboration, and we're always looking for ways to build up what's possible at the local level.
Thank you. Here's one just about sort of, are you thinking about like how to handle banning books, or kind of what's the library procedure at a public school? Just maybe your thoughts on a public library at a public school.
I'm personally appalled at any of this legislation that is banning books. It feels like we're going 60 years backwards with those types of policies. And again, it's attacking our students and for attacking their access to information. And whereas I strongly believe we want our kids to be critical thinkers who are also empathetic to other people's life experiences and to learn from the history of the world, not just the history in their community, to have a better future so that we can be empathetic and live in a diverse world with people from different backgrounds and have empathy for them. So I am personally very appalled and horrified to see that these bills have traction and are able to make it through our state legislature. And unfortunately, in my position, I don't have any veto power for those types of laws. I am required to follow the laws set by our state legislature. So really, our power is in electing new lawmakers and a new governor, people who can have an impact on the laws.
Thank you. This one's from Kathy Edelman. I'll just sort of shorten it. What are the specific guidelines to make sure that each district's curriculum meets the state requirement or certain just kind of benchmarks? And how, why is a curriculum maybe different in Tucson, TUSD versus a district in Maricopa County?
Great question. So the way it works at the state level is we set the state standards, and we work with teachers to make sure that the state standards are appropriate at the various grades, across all grade levels, across all subjects. And we constantly have a process for updating the standards. So for example, we have recently been updating the computer science standards, and then there's education technology standards. So we're constantly reviewing and updating over time to make sure that they're up to date. And then at the district level, they are required to choose curriculum that aligns to the state standards. And so that's how we ensure that even if it's different curricula, that there's alignment. Where I would say the biggest challenges lie in terms of why we see so many kids who are not at grade level comes back to the teacher shortage issue. We have an astronomical number of emergency substitute teachers teaching in Arizona because we cannot recruit sufficient teachers who have gone through an educator prep program and who have gone through whether it's an undergraduate or master's degree program to become a certified specialized teacher. Instead, we have thousands of emergency certified teachers who you only have to have your high school degree. And then our students often will have a revolving door of substitute teachers. And this, it's more severe in rural parts of the state where it's even harder to recruit teachers, but it's still unfortunately all too common in places that are even more urban areas like Tucson and Phoenix. So that would be where I have the most concern is, do you have a trained, effective teacher who is able to effectively implement and teach the curriculum that has been provided to them?
How do you think obviously it's the salary, why teachers won't teach in Arizona or why it's so difficult, but are there other reasons?
Yeah, salary is definitely one. Arizona is still has the average lowest pay in the country, and our neighboring states, even New Mexico and Utah, are giving substantial raises this year. Our state is sitting on over $5 billion of surplus funds right now, and so we have been really pushing hard right now as they're working on the budget. Right now is a really good time to be reaching out to lawmakers and expressing that they should be making public education a priority, because this is a historic amount of funding that they have the ability to budget out to have sustained funding for public education. So that is one. The second is burnout. I would say is probably the other biggest thing, especially with the pandemic. I've just heard from so many teachers and educators who are leaving the profession because so much has been piled on, and so much stress around being virtual and then back in person, and the different dynamics, all the professional development. There's just so much being piled on to our teachers that they're carrying a lot of weight and emotional stress of even helping their kids who have had traumatic experiences in particular over the last couple of years due to the pandemic. So I would say those are the two main pieces that I would point to.
Yeah, I mean, salary, obviously, but it's such a difficult environment here in the Republican-led state to teach. I can't imagine. Let's see, there's one here. How, if COVID, hopefully COVID will get better, but if for some reason it doesn't, or we have a setback, are public schools in Arizona prepared to sort of keep kids safe, and how would it look different than it did at the very beginning of the pandemic, and how do you sort of see that?
Absolutely. We have learned so much since, I think back to spring of 2020 to where we are today, now May, so over 2 years later, and we have learned so much. So now our messaging is around how do we keep kids healthy from all types of viruses, not just COVID, but even from the flu, or, a lot of kids right now are opting not to get their other standard vaccines, like the measles and other more standard ones that didn't used to be controversial, like polio, are now controversial, where families are turning away their typical vaccines. Our teachers are accustomed to teaching kids how to be healthy in the classroom, things like cover your mouth when you sneeze, or wash your hands throughout as frequently as possible throughout the day. So that will continue. And just as before the pandemic, if there is an outbreak, like for example, I happened to work in a district that had a whooping cough outbreak. There are procedures in place, and it happens at the county health department level. When there is an outbreak like that, there are procedures in place. So I think that I would leave that up to the health experts and lean on county health again. I'm hopeful we don't have to have a similar experience for the last 2 years. And I think one of our big lessons learned was that having our students virtual for an extended period actually was very detrimental to student learning. And we did have significant declines in student enrollment in our schools. So I would have a lot of concerns about having to take those types of drastic measures ever again. But I think at the time it was necessary because we just didn't know. And with the high risk level, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when we didn't know how to protect ourselves, I think it was necessary then, but going forward, hopefully we'll never have to do that again. And I think online learning can be good for some students, but having we just don't have to be at that place again for a statewide shutdown.
One thing about online learning, I think it did bring classrooms and educators the ability to organize their daily assignments on an online platform, which seems very helpful now going forward. But in person, even if you're attending school in person, obviously you are, but just having that online, whether it's Google Classroom or whatever they're using, do you think that will remain as a way that kids and teachers organize their work?
I do think so. I think, again, we did learn a lot of great lessons, and I know there's so many lessons to be taken away. And so if that worked for schools and classrooms, and I think about the future workforce where we're all relying more on technology, there's more options for remote working. I think it's really critical for kids to have that option for developing the online skills and typing skills that they need for the future workforce. I mean, I can't even imagine what it will look like when my daughter's graduating high school 18 years from now.
Absolutely. What does a typical day look like for you? Like you wake up and
yeah, there's never 2 days that look the same. I love sprinkling in the school visits and visiting different programs whenever possible. I just recently had the opportunity to go to a school district, and there's the Balt School District, which is in Phoenix, but I had the chance to they have a mindfulness program where throughout the day they do different like meditation and mindful movement activities, and it's a very Zen campus. So I just love seeing all the different types of programs. I do meet within the agency. I meet often with our agency leaders on a regular basis. I meet regularly with our policy team, especially since the legislature is still working on the budget. So we have regular check-ins with our policy team. I meet regularly with education organizations to make sure I'm hearing across the field from our school leaders as well as our teachers. And I have a student advisory council that I meet with on a regular basis, and I love hearing from them. We have just over 20 students from 5th through 12th grade from all over the state who participate in our student advisory council. So that's also one of my favorite activities.
Let's see. In terms of, obviously in Pima County and all over the state, and we have a lot of indigenous tribes that call, Arizona their home. How can what's your main concern with indigenous students and I guess rural public schools as well, but specifically ones that are on or close to like the Tohono O'odham Nation or Navajo Nation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I've thankfully had the opportunity to visit schools in both of those nations, and I think the historic trauma that they have endured over generations continues to be one of the biggest hurdles for them in the intergenerational poverty, and so there's so many cultural differences as well. So one of the ways that we aim to support our students who are Native American is we've invested several $1 million in Indigenous teacher prep programs. There's each of our 3 state universities has a specific teacher prep program for recruiting and training Indigenous teachers. So they have to be from a tribe. the teacher themselves, and then they're also learning about how to be teaching in a way that aligns with their culture. And so at the U of A, for example, we work closely with that program. It's called the Indigenous Teacher Educator Program, ITEP. And yeah, so I would encourage people to look into that, but that is one way that we can serve our students, is making sure that we have teachers who look like them, who can relate to their cultural experiences, and making sure we're doing everything we can to strengthen those teacher pipelines.
Absolutely. Thank you. I didn't know that. That's interesting. What about transportation? Like, how does that fit into, I mean, obviously if it's a big deal, but how do you see the future of transporting children to and from school?
That's a very big question, because it has become even more complex, especially the more, we have a lot of open enrollment, charter schools. So there's a lot of different transportation, even going down the same street to pick up kids going to different schools. And we do have just like everywhere in the country, we do have a bus driver shortage that has made life even more challenging for our schools to keep everything functional and rolling with having the challenges of recruiting bus drivers. So we've actually the Department of Ed partnered with the Department of Economic Security to help the Department of Economic Security understand the pipeline of what we need, like the type of people that the qualifications they would have to be able to recruit bus drivers for our schools, because the Department of Economic Security has programs to help people with finding jobs. And so we were trying to make sure that if they had people who might be a good fit for the bus driver role, that they were able to navigate the school district system to point those people towards the job openings for bus drivers. So I have no responsibility for transportation. That all happens at the local level. But the funding the funding flows through the department, just like all funding flows through the department based on their state and formulas for transportation. And another area we're digging into is transportation for special education students, because that can be a very high need for students. They need specialized transportation. And so that's actually a component of a special education cost study that we are in the process of doing, a massive statewide, it's a massive cost study. We're investing $500,000. And that's one of the areas that we're digging into, is special education transportation.
It's very needed. This one's from John Ralston, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Is there a way to teach and develop a culture of civic engagement, sort of like Civics 101? Is that taught, or do we have any plans to teach that, or when would it be taught, kind of thing?
Yeah, there actually are a ton of opportunities for civics in all of our schools. It's part of our state standard. So there's a requirement around teaching civics and history, and then upon graduation, students are required to take a civics test to graduate. And the governor actually just signed into law. It used to be that students had to pass the civics test at 60% to graduate high school, and now they have to pass it at 70%. So they're making it even more critical that our students learn civics in order to graduate high school. That is an Arizona focus. So I think our if you want to look on the Department of Ed website, you can see all the resources that we post to support civics learning across the state. But again, the curriculum decisions will be made at the local level. But I do think that that's an area where there's a lot of bipartisan support for ensuring that our students have the opportunity to learn civics. And I would just add that I want to make sure that it is culturally relevant, with diverse perspectives included, and to make sure that our students are able to learn comprehensively about different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your just sort of thoughts in the future of special education in Arizona? I know that it's a huge deal, and as a parent of kids in public school, I see the lack of it in, let's say, the charter school environment, which is just awful. they often don't take a child with special needs at all. And if they do, they can't offer what's needed. What are your thoughts about special education and Arizona public schools?
I'm glad you asked that one as well, since my background is in special education when I was working as a speech language pathologist. And that's part of the why I ran for this office, was I saw firsthand that the special education funding from our state was inadequate. And I was able to work across the aisle. And in 2020, the legislature added an additional $50 million for special education. And then this year, we're working on that special education cost study that I mentioned. And there's 3 phases to the cost study, and it will be completed by the end of this year, so that the data and information out of the cost study will be able to be used to inform our state legislature and policymaking next session. So I'm always looking for ways to support our students with disabilities. We've also used some of our federal funds in partnership with the Autism Society and Special Olympics to also help them to be able to expand their services in terms of COVID recovery and COVID
I
recovery
think
and relief.
To our audience, whether they're parents or not, or special education runs the gamut of physical disability to just like a learning disability, and so it's just much larger, I feel like, than many people know about, and so our lack of funding is detrimental to this problem. I think it's important that you look to data. That seems to be something you do a lot, and that's so effective. What other state or program do you look to and go, wow, they're doing it right, or like that's just so successful, whether it's a state or just maybe a specific district?
I think
like New Mexico, seems like they gave their teachers a huge raise, like yeah. And they're right next.
One way that we supported, one way that we're able to support our teachers, and this is through the funding that the Department of Education received from the federal COVID relief funding, was, because when I was conducting educator roundtables over the last year, I was hearing time and time again that educators and teachers were paying for classroom supplies and programs out of their own pocket. And that was one of their biggest frustrations, was not only are they not being paid adequately, but then to have to be buying all their materials, I mean, not all of them, but be paying for things out of pocket was unacceptable. And so we have been strategically looking for ways to support our educators. And one of our initiatives was we launched a partnership with Donors Choose, which created $1,000 teacher grants. And through that investment, we were able to fund over 15,000 teachers in Arizona for up to $1,000 for classroom supplies. And I know teachers used it for everything, including like across the board, so many great ideas, including flexible seating, technology like iPads, classroom book library materials, science experiment materials. So that was one way we were able to, because you're just trying to think, how do we show our appreciation for teachers? What more can we do to boost morale? And so we were very happy that I mean, those 15,000 over teachers, they spent down that $14 million in less than 2 weeks. So that the demand was there, they were ready. So we were grateful that we had that opportunity for with the funding out of the American Rescue Plan funding.
Absolutely. And I feel like a lot of those supplies will carry over into even when maybe that teacher isn't teaching in that classroom, or these are supplies that stay with the school. One other question. I feel like during the pandemic, we learned a lot about food and about kids not having enough to eat. And I don't know if the Department of Education in Arizona is responsible for that portion, or if it's like transportation, a local thing, but sort of how do you view and see the future of kids eating at school?
We are responsible for the funding, the reimbursement of food and meals. We have that connection with the USDA, and the funding flows through our department, but we do work pretty closely with schools to ensure that they have high quality programs, that we're doing everything we can to help children access those meals. And I do think there were a lot of lessons learned from the pandemic on how to effectively provide meals to kids who need food. And unfortunately, the federal government has actually been making it even more restrictive. They're kind of going back to the old ways of doing things, whereas we're advocating, our state, along with many other states, are advocating at the federal level, saying, hey, like we learned some really innovative ways for kids to access meals. So for example, some of the things that were new during the pandemic was, I don't know if you all remember, but there was a time when we said, any child, even if they're under 2 years old, doesn't matter which school you go to, as long as it's a school that's offering a meal program, doesn't matter if you're coming from a different district, doesn't matter if you're a baby, like we will serve you food. And now they're going back to making it more restrictive. Or another innovative policy was that you could pick up food for the whole week. And that made it easier for families. They didn't have to keep going back day after day after day to have access to food. But that's another area where the federal department is going back to more restrictive policy. So we haven't quite gotten there yet. Back to the restrictive policies, we're still in process of advocating, and we'll see where it lands. But I do think that there were many great lessons learned that we need to carry on into the future.
How can Tucson parents and residents, and whether they have kids or not, or kids that are out of school or little kids who aren't yet in school, how can they support the public school system in Tucson and Pima County?
There's so many. I actually just was thinking too about the Tucson Values Teachers program. That's a local organization. I believe they support more than just Tucson. I think maybe Superintendent Williams, I don't know if he's still on the call, but that is an organization that if you reach out to them, or if you want to donate to them, then they do a lot to support the local educators. And I'm sure you can find their website as well. And they do partnerships with local businesses. So if you're a business owner or leader, then I'm sure there's opportunities for sponsorship. So that, I think that would be me and one of the greatest channels to lean into. If you don't have a local school, or if you don't have kids in the schools, if you do have kids in the schools, make sure you're showing your appreciation for our teachers. I know when I was a teacher, it was really nice to get like a Starbucks gift card, or something, even just a card from the kid or the parent. I would save them. I still have a box of those types of cards because they were just so nice and so heartwarming to get, and that really helps our teachers feel valued and appreciated as well.
So I guess this is the last casual question. Tucson's definitely a food town, So what's your favorite restaurant in Arizona? That's like the toughest one of all of them.
I was going straight to Tucson. My favorite in Tucson is Boca Tacos.
Oh, okay, cool.
I go there every time I'm in Tucson, and I always run into people there too.
Yeah, or buy a teacher a gift certificate to Boca Tacos.
I love eating every time I'm down in Tucson.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoffman, so much for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you, Shelley, for being our moderator today. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening, whether you're on Facebook or you're on the webinar now. We're going into a really tough midterm year, but with engaged folks like you all, I think that we have a really great way of winning this year.